I caught my first wave on the beach in Durban, and surfing just gripped me.
I saw Shaun surfing at Muizenberg, and from there we just been real good friends.
We first met Rob through my dad and watched him play. We loved that open attacking style. Kind of this first time that like the surf vibe connected with a rugby vibe. You might not think that surfing's a contact sport, but let me tell you, when a 10-foot wave lands on your brain, it's major contact.
You're right. I mean, I broke my ribs. I just fell down the wave. We just grew up in a household just rugby crazy.
I was 23 years old. I started Instinct in Durban because the best moments in surfing, like Rob knows, are riding inside the tube, and the best tubes happen when you're operating on instinct.
Doc Craven, I don't know where you even start with the guy. He was Mr. Rugby worldwide. We cemented our hair back in those days.
We were the killers, man.
Yeah, we didn't walking, we just sliding.
Your life is irrevocably changed. In that moment you get that phone call, your old life is done. There is no sense to be made of that loss. So I'll tell you a few things that I've learned. And I paddle out and I'm crying. And the first wave washes over me and it washes my tears away.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Winning the Away Game. Today we have something really special lined up for all our listeners, something I've been looking forward to for 3 weeks or 4 weeks since I spoke to Shaun for the first time. We have two of the biggest legends in South African sports on here today to give us insight into what it takes to winning the away game. I'm literally getting goosebumps as I talk. I'm so excited. Welcome, Flip. Are you ready for a spectacular episode?
Justinus, as you said, two incredible legends today. We are interviewing a Springbok legend that is as well known in the water as he was for his flair on the field, with 19 test caps in an era where test caps were far and few between. The legend himself, Rob Louw. How's it?
How's it, Flippy? How's it, Justinus? And hello, my brother, my second brother. Shaun.
With Rob, we have another South African legend starting out in Durban and taking over the world's oceans all over from Hawaii to California. Shaun Tomson, not just a sporting and surfing pioneer, but a business legend. Shaun, we are here at your mercy to learn from your wisdom.
It's awesome to connect with you guys, and I'm so stoked to be on the show. And Justinus, when you said to me, you wanted me to come on the podcast and who I should get, which guy I should get, the first name that popped into my mind was my second brother, Rob Louw.
Well, guys, I mean, it's such a privilege, and I can't wait to delve deep. I think we love to talk about this arc around winning the away game, and I think a big part of that journey is the adversity we face and how that adversity we face in life shapes our future and the people we become. So, really looking forward to delving into that. But before we start with that, we always like to start with the same question. And I'm looking forward to the answers today more than ever before. And that question is for you as personally, what is your favorite Springbok memory?
When in 95, the World Cup in 95, I had just moved. I'd been offered a job by Patagonia in the United States. And I'd just flown out from South Africa, landed in Los Angeles, and it was the game was on, must have been about 3 or 4 in the morning. And a friend of mine and I found a pub in Santa Monica, and we were the only two South Africans in the pub. It was filled. It was... We were the only two guys there, and of course, we had our Springbok jerseys on, and they were giving us so much heat. And that game was super special, And I think that game is significant. I think for a number of reasons, because it shows how sport can bring a country together. And during the dark days of apartheid, people still kept playing rugby, because rugby was a way to bring people together. And if we'd have stopped playing rugby then, the World Cup in 95 would never have happened. And people seem to lose sight of that that the maintaining continuity of sport, regardless of political structures, it's super important. It's super important. And certainly it was wonderful to see how, Nelson Mandela used that to bring that country together. So that, for me, that was an iconic moment,
I can basically echo that. I think it was fantastic. But just echoing back again, we played a test against England in 1981 there. Now that was how many years before that? 84. So that was 11 years before that. And Errol Tobias was playing for us at fly-off. And Errol Tobias scored a try in the corner at Ellis Park. And I mean, the whole of Ellis Park stood up and cheered for him. So that was, a lot of people look back and they say, before 95 it was really bad and dark, but just shows you that at that stage there was there was a really positivity towards change in our country. And that was, if you think about it, was 14 years before that. Incredible, Shawnee. The whole of Ellis Park just stood up, absolutely stood up. I actually got it on tape. I got it on tape and now sort of replay it just to get the feeling again. Errol going over and the crowd was going crazy. So that and being on the field with I became the godfather of his son in 1981 on the tour. He made me his godfather of his son, Errol Key. So yeah, that was like the baby steps to the breaking down of the door, Shaun, like you guys did in the surfing, and the same with us, the breaking down of apartheid and the opening of the doors, which is now gone. It's unbelievable. I mean, this Springbok side is just next level. And I mean, there's problems now recently. We all know about the red cards. I don't know if you know what's happened recently, Shawnee. Every match they've been red carding us. Look, the latest one with Eben wasn't nice to see, but I reckon that South Africa will dominate world rugby for the next 20, 30 years because we've got so much talent coming through now with players of color who are so hungry, and it's just survival mode. I mean, the same as America, NFL, the basketball. These guys are hungry. And unfortunately, us whiteys aren't as hungry anymore as these oaks are. I mean, so many of them feed their families. It's unbelievable, and they're just coming through. That's so great to see.
Rob, I'd love to delve a little bit into that 1981 tour. I think Flip's dad was there with you guys, and you're in New Zealand, and all of this chaos going on. And I think I read you actually were roommate with Errol on that tour, and you weren't necessarily popular for the way you embraced the diversity in the team. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes and no. I mean, obviously the guys from the north didn't. They were. I mean, they questioned, that's 81, eh? That's right in the beginning of that was really deep apartheid to a certain extent. They didn't really understand, Errol came, being a very strong Christian, number one. He's a very strong Christian Roman Catholic and a very well-spoken guy and a very together guy. So the guys from the north, I'm talking about the Blue Bull boys, they actually, and effectively that side was the guys from the north, Tucky's Blue Bull area, and the guys from the south, us, and the Stellenbosch Marty boys. So we had a different attitude towards the colored, the players of color. So it was quite tough for these oaks to suddenly have a player of color amongst them. So but they learned quickly. They really learned. They learned. Errol's a great guy and such a special guy, and I think a lot of these guys learned and sort of learned from Errol, and that was really the start of it. The start of, and Doc Craven was behind it. Doc Craven was just an absolutely incredible man, and he had the vision, and that was the start. In actual fact, 79 we went on tour. We went on a Barbarian tour. We had eight players. We had 8 white guys, 8 colored guys. I don't want to call them color anymore, But there are eight white guys, 8 colored guys, and 8 black guys, Xhosa guys that came from the Eastern Cape. And we went on a tour, barbarian tour. And we played against, we played in Wales, we played in England and all over, and went on a tour. Obviously, big demonstrations against us and everything. But that was basically the breakthrough tour that everybody could realize that we could all play together. And the players came through. Well, Errol de Vries came through there. So yeah, that was like a breakthrough. 79 already, which was fantastic. But Doc Craven was the guy who basically pulled the strings and ruled the roost there.
Wow, that's amazing, and before his time, obviously. Okay, so let's go back to home ground. Shaun, tell us a little bit about your exposure to rugby and growing up in Durban and surfing and everything as a young boy growing up on the beach in Durban.
Yeah, so I caught my first wave on the beach in Durban at a place called the Bay of Plenty. It was right in front of where we lived on the Marine Parade on the beachfront. And, surfing just gripped me. From that first moment, I stood up on my first wave. My dad had taught me how to swim. My dad had been a champion swimmer in his youth. He wanted to win a gold. The Second World War got in the way of that. And then he came back and started practicing again for the upcoming 1948 Olympics, and then was very badly attacked by a shark while he was surfing out at a place called South Beach, a couple of 100 meters from the beach I grew up at. So he had ripped his arm from the shoulder all the way to the wrist. So he was never able to compete or he could kind of swim a little bit. But, he taught me how to body surf and swim and then surf. And I got that first wave. And surfing just gripped me. I like to think that, I surfed in my first surf competition at the same place where I stood up for the first time. And I joke that I was an instant success. I got third in my first event. There was only 3 of us, but I got my third. But I loved rugby. I was at Clifton School, which was a well-known preparatory school in Durban. Then I went to Carmel College. I'm Jewish. It was a Jewish school. So we spent a lot of time under the posts arguing like who let the winger in, who let the hooker. We used to just get thumped, but we used to love playing rugby. And my father was a major rugby enthusiast. He had 6 seats on the 50 at Kings Park, and he would go to every single game, every single Saturday afternoon, no matter how good the surf was. The whole family trooped off to Kings Park. And my father was from the era of, his hero was Keith Oxley. Do you remember him, Rob? Legendary fly half. Keith Oxley, Trixie Truter, Tommy Bedford. We loved Tommy Bedford. And then, in the early days, there used to be this expression. I don't know if it's super politically correct, but they used to call it gelukkige Jood. And Sid Nomus was the guy, and Sid dated my cousin. So he can't, you have the Friday night dinner, and Sid was there, and we were like stoked out of our minds because he was the first sort of rugby hero that that we had. So a lot of fond memories of being on Kings Park, watching the games. We'd watch every single test. Watch the All Blacks come. We watch the Lions come, and then we'd watch the club matches, collegians, and the local. There was Durban High School Old Boys. We were like fully into it. My brother and I, we'd be like, sometimes we'd be touch judges. We just had the greatest time. Rugby was as much a part of my life as surfing. And then, when we first met Rob through my dad and watched him play, that we loved that open attacking style. You know what I mean? The running, the flair, the lang hare, and and the kind of this first time like the surf vibe connected with a rugby vibe. So yeah, a lot of great fond memories growing up in Durban.
That is excellent, Shawnee. Rob, growing up in Cape Town, Wynberg, Stellenbosch, and then province afterwards. Take us back. When did you know? Growing up as a kid, when did you know that rugby is the thing you're going to become a professional?
I didn't turn professional because I played for 10 rand a test match. Just understand that. Until I turned to rugby league.
Yeah, but a house costs 20.
Yeah, until I turned to rugby league, and then I made some money eventually playing for Wigan up north in England, in the mud and the squalor. No. So my dad was a referee. My dad refereed. He was he refereed one or two provincial matches. But he was a referee, and we just grew up in a household just rugby crazy, playing with balls, rugby balls, by the way, playing with balls so young, and we just and then I think when I was 16 years old, I sort of then we were playing, obviously Wynberg, Sax, Bishops, Ronnebosch, Paul Roos, Paul Bozai. And we were unbeaten, actually. We were unbeaten for English school. We had an unbeaten run under 13, under 14, under 15, playing against all the top Afrikaans schools here. Under 16, still unbeaten. And then there was a guy by the name of Peter Kirsten, who was a great cricket player, probably one of our greatest, who was playing for Sax. And Sax beat us. And my dad was a referee. I'll never forget it, at Wynberg. And then I realized that was there was potential, and Doc Craven had seen me play my first Craven week at Stellenbosch, and I didn't get a bursary in those days. I mean, there was no money. I don't think they gave money. It was the amateur era, so I don't think they were allowed to. But Doc Craven basically reached out and asked me to come to Stellenbosch, and that was a big honor just to be. And so I was still playing cricket, and I was doing everything. I mean, and then obviously surfing, which has always been my love, and it still is my love. Sean knows. I mean, I reckon if people ask me, I'll never forget, Shawnee, there was a Sports Illustrated that came out one year, and they have on the front cover. I remember the front cover, they had me posing in the front cover. And they asked me, what was your greatest sporting occasion? And I said to them, having an 8-foot wave at Jeffreys Bay. I don't think many of the rugby aficionados were very happy with me. But it's still my passion. And I saw Shaun surfing at the Spurs surfabout, or something, at Muizenberg, and we hooked up as buddies, and then he said to me, I'm going to send you sponsorship clothes. And from there, we just been real good friends and buddies, and it's just great, It's incredible how, and Flip, the respect amongst top sportsmen that whatever sport you come from, I mean, the sacrifice that the guys have gone through and the journey that they've gone through to and that they reach the top, whatever sport. There's always that mutual respect, which is fantastic, and I think it'll always be there. That's fantastic. But so that's why I'm so happy to catch up with my buddy. We sort of speak on Instagram now and again. We Instagram each other and we pass the comments. And Robbie, who was living in LA. He lives there probably about 3 months of the year, normally with his fiance, who's a top model. But then now he said, that's it, no more. So when she goes across there now, he's decided now he's staying here now. She can go by herself. So, yeah.
It's a good point, Rob, that respect amongst sportsmen, it transfers over no matter what sport it is. Like you say, we have that commonality of passion and purpose and sacrifice, for the love of what we're doing. And, like when both of us in our careers, it wasn't like we were in the money era. You know what I mean? We did it because we loved it. I remember getting to Hawaii. I had $300, man, and $150 I spent on a car that was going to last me 3 months. I bought this old wreck, all I needed to do was, drive like 20 Ks between one side of the North Shore and the other. At the end of the season, I just left the car on the side of the road with the keys in it with a note, good luck. There was there was no money, but, we had the same passion that the guys do today. And, that respect between sportsmen is great. I don't know if you remember, Rob, I went with you to Newlands. You introduced me to Groot Skalk, and it was like going to a place with not so much the mayor, but the president. The love that people had for you in that stadium, Rob, it was so wonderful to see that that incredible amount of respect, and it was just good to be around and to see that warmth. It was wonderful. Rugby has that camaraderie. Surfing has that camaraderie. Even though we're not in a team sport, there's still that connectivity and camaraderie and commonality between people that have that, that passion, that go for it, because you might not think that surfing's a contact sport, but let me tell you, Rob, when a 10-foot wave lands on your brain, it's major contact. I mean, okay, maybe it's not like two hookers going head to head literally, but it's the pain and suffering and dangers there. So, we have that commonality of having experienced that like radical impact and that that passion. When I come roaring out of a big tube, it must be the same as, roaring over the bloody try line there.
I was asked one day, I was asked by, on television show, they asked me, why do you love surfing so much? And it was a bit of a difficult situation, because suddenly I was just accosted with this question. And I think there's a number of things, and the one is obviously adrenaline. I mean, we're adrenaline junkies, without a doubt. And then the other thing is just the contact also situation. You're right. I mean, I broke my ribs about 6 years ago surfing Silver Point. I came off. I just fell down the wave. I fell off and I broke 2 ribs. So it just shows you it was a fairly big wave. It wasn't, but I mean, it just shows you what these guys go through. They surf pipeline. I mean, Shaun's photographs. I mean, these guys are just unbelievable, and just seeing the guys, what they go through. And that's why I got so much respect, because I know, the adrenaline trip that they go through, and the ballast you was at. You've got to be a big ballast, let me tell you now. These oaks have got big ones. They got big guns, and I mean, it's unreal. So I've always, and I still love the sport. I mean, I don't know about you, Shawnee, but I get in the water for 2 hours and I paddle, and I probably have 4 waves, and I come home stoked. And my wife says, "What's it?" And I shout out of the car, 4 waves. 2 years before that, I used to come up and you'd have 20 waves, and now I get stoked for 4 waves. And she said, "Oh," I just said, "Listen, Luffy, watch out tonight. You must watch out." So that's a great thing about surfing, and then also, I mean, getting in the water, and you got in the old days, and we always had these great whites hanging around, and obviously, and the whole situation of just being out, in the open, just love just being in nature. I mean, I love nature. It's fantastic. It's a special sport.
Yeah, this is so awesome.
Rob, you mentioned the Doc Craven, and Doc Craven has impacted so many incredible rugby players and people, in South Africa, legends that came through. My dad included. He refined the Kalahari boykie into the good human that he is today. Tell us a little bit about the impact that Doc Craven had on yourself.
Okay, first of all, I must tell you some naughty stories about your mom and your dad. How's that?
Of course, that's why we're here.
Here we go. So Azul lived about 5 flats away from mom or dad's flat in Stellenbosch, Haaghof. Okay, now you can imagine, flip. his father, he weighed about 140 kilograms. He's a big man. He's a big man. I don't mean to flip on him ever, Shawnee, but he's the biggest Springbok ever. Huh? Is that right, Flip?
He was, but I think the guys these days are, they're 140 when they get born, so I think they're a little bit bigger now.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And Karen, your mother, is also she's a big lady also. She's a big Buddha-tani. I remember they had this small little bed, and then she used to come and kaya in those days. And I don't know how those two slept on that damn bed, but even so, you must ask him one day what they did, or what they did. It was unbelievable. We used to always laugh about it. Flip and Corin, that one little small bed. Unreal. No, Doc Craven, well, I don't know where you even start with the guy. He was an absolute mentor. He had a double doctorate, as most people didn't know. And he was just he was a visionary. He was an incredible man. And I think, so looking back now, he would walk into the room, or also walk into like a big hall of 1,000 people, 2,000 people. And as he walked in, that whole hall would just go quiet. He just had this incredible impact. He just had so much presence. It was just incredible. And yeah, he coached me. They sort of helped me at Stellenbosch and coached me, and it was just incredible to have a guy that could hold your hand through all those days, and the early days of the injuries and stuff like that. And then, he became like my second father in a way. So I was very fortunate having an incredible man like him, who was so well respected worldwide. Probably, if you talk to any New Zealander or Welshman or whatever, and you say Doc Craven, everybody knew about him. He was Mr. Rugby worldwide, and he had the vision of certain stuff. He was the first guy to dive past, first guy to do certain stuff. And South African rugby, I believe, was led by brains like him. And then we went through a period where South African rugby, I shouldn't say that they didn't have brains, but they didn't have good coaches, without a doubt. We've always had the athletes and the players. We always have had, and we just haven't had top coaches. And arrives Rassie Erasmus, a flawed genius, without a doubt. Flippy would know he's a flawed genius, but he's a genius, and he's just got this side. This side is just incredible. What they achieved now on this last tour is just, I don't think there's any side in the world. And the New Zealanders try and compare their side. I think from 2011 to 2015, but they can't. This side, this side consists of 45 great players, whereas their side consisted of probably 10 great players and 5 sort of normal players, and reserves not great. These guys have got 3 teams at this stage. We got 3 teams of players, and they just keep on coming. It's unbelievable. We have got so much depth, and it all comes from vision that Doc Craven basically had, and now Rassie's brought it through, without a doubt. Amazing. It's actually amazing. But yeah, Doc, I can only echo. Every person that's met him, and your dad also, Flippy. I'm sure he's got the same situation. He's just an absolute incredible man and a genius. And he had such a big impact on all of us.
Very first book was Doc Craven's ABC of Rugby.
Yeah, that's right. ABC of Rugby. Yeah. I actually failed it in university. You know that. They wanted me for another year at Stellenbosch, so they failed me.
Well, they wanted you to play more rugby, man.
Yeah.
Awesome, Rob. And isn't it amazing how those mentors early in our career shape the person we become and how we grow? Shaun, did you have mentors in the surfing in South Africa, or did you have to go to Hawaii to find them?
No, my big mentor was my father. He loved sport. My father loved sport. He loved sportsmen, but particularly, he came to love surfing, which was something. Yes, he surfed when he was, when he was young. But as surfing started to progress, he was sort of right at the forefront of being a visionary. He created the longest running professional surfing event in the world. And it became, it was called the Durban 500. He started that in 1969. And that is still going today. It's called the Belito Pro today. But it's the longest running pro event in the world. And every year he would bring in surfers from overseas, from Hawaii and Australia, to help uplift South African surfing. So, he wasn't only interested in my career, but he was interested in the career of surfers generally in South Africa. I think he helped make surfing a lot more respectable. Back in my era in the first day, people thought surfers boom smokers, boom smokers, and boom geruk, yeah. So I think once he created this like professional aspect to surfing, and then you had an amazing guy down in Cape Town, a guy called Basil Lomberg, who really had great inroads into amateur surfing, and suddenly surfing became respectable. And then I started doing well, and it would get a lot of it got a lot of publicity in the press because there weren't that many sportsmen in those days succeeding internationally. There was terrific stuff. There was great sportsmen internally, but I was lucky enough to be involved in a sport in which, even during apartheid, I could still compete. And so, there was a lot of, we managed to get a lot of publicity, and consequently surfing grew and grew and grew. But my dad was a real mentor. He really looked at sport with a great deal of honor and integrity. He would say to me, "Son, there's nothing worse than a sportsman that cheats." To him, that was like the cardinal offense, a sportsman that cheats. And he would talk to me about the philosophy of winning and losing. He'd say to me, "Son, when you win like a gentleman, and when you lose like a man." From the very, very first time I started competing, he would say, "Never ever complain about a judge's decision. That decision," he would say, "that decision is carved in stone. You will never change that decision. You will just humiliate yourself. Do not complain, just accept it and move on." And as an athlete, you get pounded and you lose. But I always just moved on. I never dwelt on that loss. Do you know what I mean? And that came from my dad. It's just, when you win like a gentleman. When you lose like a man. And that decision is in stone. So that way, I would never get into that sort of downward cycle of despair that many sportsmen get into. They lose, and then they dwell on that loss, and they can't figure out how to get the passion and the mojo to go out there and clear their minds and go on to the next event. And then, even right through my career, he gave me advice and encouragement, but he was never a director. I was the director. Did you know what I mean? When I was out in the lineup, he wasn't whistling on the beach or with flags or telling me which board to use. That was my responsibility. But he definitely gave me the encouragement and the moral fortitude. Can you imagine? I'm in the army now. I'm 17 years old. My commandant's given me time off to compete in the Gunston. And it was a huge event. We used to get 30 or 40,000 people on the beach. I mean, maybe even more. It was a massive event. And I've made it into the final, and I have a good final. And in those days, it wasn't instantaneous judging. You didn't know. The judges knew the result, but you would have to come in and you'd all get up on the podium, and there would be, 30,000 people there, and then they would announce the result. And I knew I'd done well, okay? And there's 6 of us in the final. So the 6 of us are standing up on the podium, and I look up at my dad. They used to have a big tower on the beach. I don't know if you've seen it, Rob, but there was used to be like they called it the Gunston Tower, and it was orange and it had Gunston on it. And I look up at my dad. My dad's in the tower. And I go to him like, "Dad, how have I done?" I'm standing here with a 6'5", and he goes like this to me. He gives me the thumbs down. And I go, "Oh, what a bummer. And then they announced the results, and in 6th, 5th, 4th, 2nd, and winning Shaun Tomson. And I run up there and I look up my dad, and my dad is hysterical with laughter. You know, it's like such a huge joke to him. And, you know, it taught me a lesson that winning is super important, but it's not everything. Do you know what I mean? And I think as a sportsman, if you have that attitude that it's everything, it puts so much pressure on you. Yes, it's important. It's important to give it and give it everything, but it's not everything. And if you lose, there's going to be another opportunity. And, you know, I always had that attitude, and I think it gives you that sort of stillness. It gives you that that feeling. It's like an anti-desperation feeling. Do you know what I mean? And I think as a sportsman, when you're desperate, that's when the stress is. That's when you're not going to actually perform at your best, because the stress will be counterproductive. So my dad was the biggest mentor and coach to me.
Can I interject there? So 30,000 spectators were there. 25,000 were women baying after Shaun Tomson.
Oh, that's funny, Rob.
All those bookies were Shaun.
Oh, that was funny. Yeah.
They were all baying because you know what, and that's so true. In those days, the surfers were known as daggarokers. It actually came from, and they all thought that we all smoked dagga. I mean, I've never touched this stuff. I'm sure you never touched this stuff either. Every soul set calls me, and the guys still call me whatever it is. They all think I'm on this stuff. I've never ever been on this stuff. But even so, but it's amazing. But Shaun was the first surfer really to be on the billboards. On the billboards in New York, and walking around there, strutting his physique and everything, and all the bookies ran after him, and he was on the beach. So that's the oak there. That's him. That's a man. Remember, Shawnee, you myself get out. We should go to the clubs. Myself and Shaun would walk in Cape Town, and we cement our hair back in those days.
Yeah, we were the killers, man.
We stuck gel and put gel in our hair, and we used to walk into the clubs there. And we used to slide in. We didn't walk in, we used to slide in.
Yeah. That
was a good day.
We used to bowl in like a breaker.
Like a breaker. But there's, yeah. But Shaun was the first guy to show that surfers aren't just daggarokers, and I mean, there you have it. There we have it. So it was fantastic, yeah.
Rob, you were one of the first guys to actually go a little bit against the grain and went overseas to play first in Italy, and then later on did the switch to league for Wigan. Caused a little bit of a stir, a little bit of controversy. Take us a little bit through those decisions. What did it take back then to actually go overseas and play over there?
So, I mean, obviously at that stage, I was an up-and-coming sort of, sort of future sort of rugby player, and then Western Province said, no, you must stay here. So I joined up for 4 years, in the Navy, at Wingfield, very far away from the sea, but even so, I was at Wingfield sports officer. How's that? Sports officer. So I used to go every year and go and play for 4 months. I used to go and play in Italy. I used to go and play in a little town by the name of L'Aquila, which is about an hour and a half's drive from Rome, up in the mountains. And so every year I used to go there, and then I used to come back and I used to study. How's that? So the University of L'Aquila used to invite me to come, across there to study extra, extra upon my degree. So I was studying in Italian, but I was playing rugby and skiing. How's that? So for years and years, I actually played there, and then that's sort of off season. And I mean, still, I was back there now again in February. So we got a very close sort of affinity with L'Aquila and Italy, and we go back, sort of yearly. We go back, and myself and I think Tian Stoffberg were the first guys to go across, Springbok to go across and play there. And we were being paid, what was it? I was being paid in those days. I was the highest paid rugby player in the world. I was being paid 10,000 Rand a month. How's that? In 1981. How's that?
That was real money, man.
That was real money, gentlemen. Yeah.
That was big.
So I was, so we were the first guys that was, that sort of paid by the Italians, and then obviously in '95 it turned professional, but we were being paid under the table in those days. So the whole of, I mean, there were the top rugby players in the world were basically playing in Italy in those days, and we all played there. So every New Zealander, every Australian, everybody would go there and play for the clubs, and then get a little bit of money. And from that money, I eventually built my first house. I was thankful. So that got me going. It's amazing. So and then obviously, I mean, rugby league, I was 30 years old. At that stage, the All Black tour was cancelled. The guys wouldn't tour. That was 1985. Yeah, that was cancelled. The Lions tour was cancelled also, and I just said no ways. I'm 30 years old, and I want to experience life, and I want to go on an adventure. I watched the guys play at Wembley. Two top sides were playing in Wembley, and I still watched the final, and I just decided that's it. I'm going to go across and play a new game, completely new sport, completely different sport. And so I was lucky enough to go. I spent 3 years playing for Wigan. Myself and Ray Mort went across, and it was an incredible experience. It was amazing going into the Lions' Den, because those guys hate rugby union. If you understand, I mean, they all get signed at 16, 17 years old for like 4 years for pittance, and it's played by the real rough people of the world. You can't believe it. I mean, the Oaks.
You told me they were coal miners.
Many coal miners. I mean, cotton mill workers, coal miners. Most of them had no teeth. I mean, you will never believe the guys we played with. I mean, most of them, our captain and our vice captain had done time. Well, many of the players had done time. Most of them, you can't believe it. So you come from playing for Stellenbosch University and South Africa, where you got like 3/4 of the guys have got degrees, and suddenly you got these oaks they've all come out of jail. So amazing game. And I was lucky enough to play against Australia. And Australians came out to play against Wigan, and I played against Wally Lewis. I don't know, Shaun, if you know, the top rugby league players in Australia, and I played against that great side. Came on as like the bomb squad for 30 minutes. I came on the field and played against Australia. So that was it was an incredible experience to go and play there. But the greatest experience, just going back to Italy, was being in Italy and just learning. The Italians teach you so much. They teach you so much about family, about values, family values, about a love of the family. Very similar to Jewish families, Shawnee. Very much close sort of bound families, and it was an amazing experience. And that's why I love going back there. I remember our first game we played. Now, the Italians don't like playing away from home, I can tell you now. And the French don't either. They do that. I think the French don't like playing away from home either. But the Italians, they would play at home and win by 60 points. And then they would go away and play in Catania or somewhere in Sicily, and they lose by 80 points. That's the way they are. And we played against Rovigo. Rovigo had a hell of a strong side. They'd won the championships. Went up north, played against them, and we beat them. And I remember walking to the change room, and all the guys were crying. I mean, us Buddhist Yankees, us South Africans, so what the hell's happening here? These Oaks. And I walked in, and I thought, I must also cry with the Oaks. So I was crying with him, and I just realized, I mean, the passion that those guys, and it's unbelievable. It was incredible experience. The Italians are a special nation, I must say. And it's so good to see them doing well now, which is lekker.
Rob, so how did the South African rugby establishment treat you after you made the decision to play for Wigan?
So I'm still banned. Can you believe it? I mean, they've unbanned everybody. I'm still banned. They never unbanned me. No, but Doc Craven, it's quite amazing. When I got back, Doc Craven got hold of me and he said to me, I've always known you to be an adventurer. And he said, I knew that you would do something like that. So Doc knew me well, and he said, I knew you would enjoy it and go across and make it an adventure. And that's what I liked. I mean, Doc sort of, obviously, he was angry with me that, I didn't play against the Cavaliers, which was like a semi All Black side, but he was still proud of me, I think. Well, they're going across and playing league and doing well there.
So what was did they just ban you from playing rugby in South Africa because you had broken the amateur code, and it's still in place today?
Well, they never unbanned me, but I mean, but now obviously professional, so it's a different game now, But yeah, so they just banned us from everything. I mean, we couldn't coach, we couldn't do anything when we got back. We were
Ray as well, you and Ray.
Yeah, but then Ray got back, and I think he helped the 95 guys with fitness or something like that, and he got involved. So, I mean, obviously, I've always come with that thing where I'm still banned, but I mean, obviously have unbanned us now with the guys being paid big money, and they've been paid big money, Shawnee. These guys, Flippy, being involved with the rugby boys, they're getting paid Makula money now.
The boys these days, every year, when we started playing, the older guys said, "No, you guys are earning so much money," and now we're hearing what these current guys are earning. But they should get paid more. If you compare to other sports and how many people. I think the stats on the Springbok's French game was over 9 million people watched the game globally.
That's
it's quite impressive.
Shaun, so at some stage, you also decide that you need to spread your wings and go conquer the world outside there. Tell us about that decision and what was it like landing in Hawaii and building a sport and a life and a career all at the same time.
Yeah, the first time I went to Hawaii was, I was 14 years old. It was actually for my bar mitzvah present. My father took me. My father loved Hawaii. His hero was a Hawaiian legendary swimmer called Duke Kahanamoku, who won multiple gold medals in multiple Olympics. He's like the greatest Hawaiian sportsman of all time. And my dad, being a champion swimmer, loved Duke. And after the shark attack, my father was sent to San Francisco for arm surgery, and then recuperated in Hawaii and met the Kahanamoku family. Met his heroes, and I like to think, they helped him on the road to recovery. You can imagine you're an athlete, you're going for the Olympics, and then suddenly your career's done. Your career's over in one bite. But my father never ever exhibited bitterness. He never ever had that, would've, could've, should've. I could have been a champ. I should have been a champ. He never ever had that attitude. And I think, he instilled that in me. And I like to think that maybe during his recuperation period in Hawaii and meeting the Kahanamokus, he just had this brightness for Hawaii. And then as a surfer, Hawaii was our Mount Everest. It was the place that you had to go. You had to make a name for yourself in the biggest, most challenging, most dangerous waves in the world. That's where all the great surfers would gravitate every winter season, which would run from November to January. And that's where all the big surf contests were held. And growing up in Durban, I had pictures of Hawaii, in my bedroom. And, I knew I always wanted to go there. I wanted to challenge those waves, and I wanted to win over there. So I started going at a young age, 14, and then I went every year all the way through to 1989. I mean, at 15, my cousin Michael and I went there. I was 15, Michael was 16, a young Margate guy, Anthony Brodowitz, was, we were 14, 15, 16. Our parents just let us go to Hawaii by ourselves. We stayed in a caravan on the beach, and, it was like a wild time. And, then I started doing well at a young age. I won my first major pro when I was 19. It was the biggest event in the world at Sunset Beach in huge surf. I was sort of the outsider and won. And then the next year I won, the most famous event in the world, the Pipeline Masters. And at the same time, there was a group of Australian guys who also had this vision that one day we would be able to make a living from going surfing. And like you mentioned there, Flip, that, each year you say, well, the next generation, you guys are going to benefit. And that's what's happened. It's just been an evolution. And today the young guys are making millions. Surfing has, they reckon just on a participant level, there's about 24 million surfers around the world. So, it's grown just in terms of participants. But the attraction and the allure of surfing is very, I think, is very culturally relevant. And it's created, it's giving people the opportunity to create good businesses. I mean, when I was young, when I was 23 years old, I started Instinct in Durban, which grew into, it was one of the biggest brands in South Africa, and then we sold in 13 countries. And it was wonderful to be able to create a business out of what I loved, and I called it Instinct because the best moments in surfing, like Rob knows, are riding inside the tube, and the best tubes happen when you're operating on Instinct. And Instinct's a name that I always felt crosses over into all sports. It doesn't matter whether it's rugby, cricket, tennis, baseball. When you're operating on instinct, when you're operating in that state of flow, man, it's like you can do no wrong. You are going to bloody, no one can stop you. You're in the zone, yeah. So, the name had a lot of resonance, and then I sold it when I retired, but I recently bought it back, and, we did a little launch in South Africa, we got a little launch going in Australia, and we launched here in the United States a few months ago. But, one of the best things, and I'm sure all you guys will attest to this as well, is that, my father had such a big influence on me, and not just me, but he helped so many other athletes, so many other surfers realize their dreams. If a guy was battling for money, he would give him a board, or if a guy needed to go to a prize giving and didn't have any kit to wear, my dad would, buy him some clothes. He just was very uplifting. And, when I had Instinct, I had the opportunity of sponsoring other surfers to help them realize their dreams and mentor them. And in 1985, how about this? I had sponsored a young Australian at the time called Tom Carroll. So 1984, under Instinct, he won the world title. And then 1985, I led the tour the whole year. I was in front until the very last event that Tom beat me. So here I am.
That's right. I remember that.
I'm competing against a guy that I'm sponsoring as well, which was very bittersweet. I'll tell you that. It was very bittersweet. But it was great to be able, to use my experience and mentor other guys and create an impact that way, as I'm sure that Rob, you've mentored and inspired and helped many guys. And what you did with Errol and that was a big thing that you did, not just for Errol, but for the country and for the team too. All the guys from the bloody Northern Transvaal and the Free State, and seeing that this was the future, and how these little impacts that you can have on a person-to-person basis create this ripple effect. You drop a stone, create a ripple, build a wave.
Brilliant. True, Shawnee, fantastic. It's true.
I was 13 years old when I was allowed my first Instinct T-shirt, and I wore it religiously.
So, Rob, obviously go full circle then for your rugby career. You playing rugby league, and at some point, it's getting towards the end. Take us through that decision and how it culminated and how you started over once rugby was over.
Yeah, so obviously playing in the north of England with beautiful weather and palm trees and lovely
almost
beaches.
like Hawaii.
And there was a fantastic pier in Wigan, a fantastic place there with the Carlgat Macy's and them, you know what I mean? And what happened was the Australian side actually offered me a contract. They offered me quite a big contract. They just started 2 new sides in Australia, I think in Newcastle and something else, and they said, okay, well, will you come? They wanted to sign us up for big money. And I was hurtful. I was just, Shawnee, when you have spent 2.5 years in the north of England, and I mean, really, our winters are warmer than their summers. I mean, it's unreal. and with those bloody Neanderthals, I shouldn't call them Neanderthals, but they were Neanderthals. Except for, interesting, Joe Lydon, he was an ex-Union boy, and he coached, I think he coached the England sevens team. And there was a guy, Sean Edwards, playing with us, who now coaches the defense of the French team. And then there also was the guy who plays the fly-off now of England.
Farrell.
No, Farrell's father played just after us, but the English fly-off now. Ford. So Michael Ford played with us. So it was quite interesting. We had a whole mix of guys. I was longing for Cape Town. I couldn't wait to get back. 32 years old. And I thought, go to Australia now for another 2-3 years and get bashed. Let me tell you now, rugby league, union's a tough sport, but league, the guys, you can see how they look. It's a real tough sport. And I decided no. And I came back, brought my money back. In those days, we had the Fin Rand. You know what the Fin Rand was, Shawnee? The financial rand. So what I did was I stuck my money away in the Isle of Wight or Wright. And then did the contract with Wigan, and then I brought the money back. The Fin Rand in those days was 70 to the pound. That was 1987, 88. There was like so I brought it back. I bought my property and I started my business. I got into into building boats, inflatable boats. And then I got involved. Quite a big factory. I set up in Cape Town, and then started racing it to augment my adrenaline trip. And then I was racing. I actually designed that double nose boat. I don't know if you there's that double nose boats. Well, we were the first guys to. Well, I was the first guy to design that. My wife actually told me, take the nose away. Why have a round nose? I took it away, and it's just an incredible thing. Actually, amazing. We can actually surf for that thing. It's amazing. And then I had that hell of an accident. The guy rode over me, cut me to pieces. My arm. I was lucky to survive that. And then eventually got out of. At that stage, the yen was too strong against the rand, and I was bringing in boats. I was doing boats, engines, and trailers, and I just decided, let me get out of here. And my brother took it over. So my brother's still running it, funny enough, Robbie Duck. So I went from there, and then I went into thatching. How's that? So I've been running the thatching company now for 30 years. And I have about, from at times I've 10, 12, 15, up to 25 to 30 workers working. And we've been doing quite big contracts. And but now I'm gatvol. How's that? That's a good Afrikaans word for that. I've actually, myself and my wife have decided Durban and Cape Town's just become, you will not believe. Shawnee, you cannot believe what's happened. There's been a semigration. Everybody's moved down to Cape Town. It's absolutely, you can't drive anywhere. It's just cars and cars and cars. And we've made a decision now. We are ducking. We're going to Stilbaai. We're going to live there. I've got a little place there. We're going to go and spend time there. I will then travel up and down the coast and surf. Where I am, it's quite close to everything. Vic Bay and Mossel Bay and everything, and J Bay. Surf there, and then go overseas and ski. I love my skiing, my snow skiing. So we want to spend. Shawnee, you're also 70, aren't you? 70. Can you believe it, Bruce?
Bali.
Bali. So at 70, so you know what? I think it's time to enjoy our lives. When the person works and you work and I've seen so many people when they're 72, 73, they suddenly realize, okay, now I'm going to retire. And then they get sick and they can't enjoy themselves. So I'm still physically fine. Well, fairly fine. And I just think that one must enjoy ourselves now. So that's it, Brew. Come down to JB and go and surf together. How's that?
Isn't that amazing? Thanks for sharing, Rob. So, Shaun, you're out there in the world competing, winning titles, creating a profession along the way, and running businesses. Tell us about that journey from being at the high of surfing and then going on after you decide you can't do that anymore every day.
Yeah, so I think Rob and I, we have a similarity of stories, that we both had these sort of cataclysmic occurrences in our life. I mean, Rob had two, essentially, one with his injury with a boat, and then the other with his battle with cancer. And a lot of people know that my wife and I lost our beautiful son. But before that, after I retired in 1990, and I decided that I'd given it everything I had surfing. I'd hit it so hard. I was about 7 or 8 years older than the other youngest guy on tour. I was the biggest guy on tour. They were all small, pretty much small blokes. And the tour had moved towards a lot of events and a lot of small surf. And when the surf was really small, I just, I wasn't that good. And, to compete against an 18-year-old when the surf's 2 to 3 feet, it was becoming increasingly difficult. And also, I wasn't that stoked to surf in those events. So I decided at the beginning of the year in 1989 that I would retire. I would run out, I would compete in all the events that year. So it was a great year for me, because at every event, people did a little celebration for me and, thanked me. So it was a wonderful way to end. But I was committed to finishing my career, and then that was it. There was going to be no comebacks. I'd given it everything I had. So I never looked over my shoulder. And I think for an athlete, when they decide to retire, I think it's really important that not to live in that world of would have, should have, could have. It's just like you give it and then you stop and then you move on to the next thing. So for me, there was a couple of things I wanted to do. I'd never completed my university degree that I'd been studying for at Natal University. I had 3 credits outstanding. So in 1990, I go back to university to finish my degree, and I moved back. Now I've been traveling around the world. Moved back to SA permanently, back to Durban. My wife and I had gotten married. Carla, a Durban girl, we gotten married in 1987.
I was there. We joled.
Yeah, where we joled. I had 2 partners in Instinct. It was myself and this family. And it's like, must be about February or March of 90. Now, I'm at university. Instinct's going well. And my partners and I got into a dispute. And it was really ugly. And they said, okay, we'll buy you out. So I went, what could I do? So I went, it was kind of almost like a forced buyout, okay? So I go home and I walk in and my wife's there, and I say to her, I'm out of Instinct. And she turns around to me and says, well, I'm pregnant. So talk about a change. So I sold out of Instinct and embarked on a new project. Now, I'm going to be a dad, and it was quite an emotional time, because I'd loved what I'd done with Instinct. I'd loved the image we'd created, but I moved on. Do you know what I mean? Like I moved on. And then after a few years living in Durban, I decided that it was important for me to use the assets that I had that were very applicable to the surf industry. And the heart of the surf industry was California. And that's where the most financial opportunity for me was in California. So I remember I flew over to California, and you must remember at that time is there was 5 of us guys that built and created the surfing professional tour and the surfing industry. You know, we built it just from a dream of going surfing. We built this multi-billion-dollar industry and business. And I remember going, now I'm looking for a job. You know, I'd never had a job. I'd always been a pro. I'd had my own businesses. Yes, I'd had sponsorship from different companies, sunglasses and wetsuits and all that sort of thing. But I had never been employed by anyone. And I thought I was quite a catch. You know, here I was the only surfer with a formal university education. I'd helped build the industry. And I knocked on the doors of all these famous surfing companies. And not one of them was willing to give me a chance. It wasn't like I was knocking on the door saying, this is going to be your new CEO. You know, I'm just going like, you know, I'm going to move to the United States. I want a chance. I want an opportunity. And not one of them would give me a chance. And athletes got to realize that. Let me tell you, you think people are there going to support you when your career's done. You better understand that most of the time it ain't going to happen. You're going to be busting down doors in the same way that you did during your sporting career. You're going to be having to bust down doors in order to be successful. It's not like you have a golden pathway. And maybe today in rugby it might be a bit different, but the golden pathway to me was a dream. Anyway, no one would give me a chance. And on my last day in the United States, I was up getting boards from this famous surfboard shaper, a guy called Al Merrick. And he said, hey, Shaun, there's a super cool company that's like 30 K south of here that makes great fleecy jackets. And the owner's a surfer. You got to phone him up. And I said, well, what's the name of the company? And he said, it's Patagonia. Now, Patagonia is an incredibly famous company here in the United States, but I'd never heard of them. I said, you know, who's Patagonia? I said, the only Patagonia I know is a mountain range in Chile. So he said, no, they make cool fleecy jackets. And I went down there the next day, and I met the guy I'm meeting. And as I walk into the HQ, I see there's a school that's attached to the HQ. And I say to the guy I'm meeting, what's with the school? He said, it's our school for the kids of our employees. I went, wow, what an amazing company that actually has a school for the kids of their employees. And then they showed me through the business, and I went, wow, this is an amazing business. I knew that I could both contribute and I could both learn a lot from this business. And I stayed there for 2 years. They flew my whole family out, my wife and my son, from South Africa. I actually stayed with them for 6 months. They were just amazing to me. And I learned a lot about purpose-driven businesses. So for me today, in the new business that I'm in, it's like purpose is the foundational value of great businesses. And they were a purpose-driven business, the first purpose-driven business that I'd ever been associated with, because it had always been profit, sales, and growth, profit, sales, growth. But now it's purpose, and learned a lot there. And, the owner would have these philosophy sessions. And, at one of them, he said, hey, Shaun, you've got to understand, doing good is good for business. How about that for an amazing philosophy? Doing good is good for business. So I stayed there for 2 years. Then my wife and I went out and we started a new brand. We called it Solitude. And Instinct was about riding inside the tube. Solitude was about escape. And we ran Solitude for about 7 years. And then we got an offer, just got a phone call from a big publicly traded company that wanted to buy us. And we sold the company and we stayed on for a few years. And then just after the sale concluded, I had a new book I'd just written at the publisher. That's when we lost our boy. And, that's when everything came crashing down.
Just at this very important moment in the conversation, Rob's laptop battery unfortunately ran out and we were unable to get him back into the recording. However, what followed with Shaun was a conversation I'll never forget. Here is the rest of Shaun's story. Shaun, thanks for sharing that. Steve Jobs had this amazing speech he gave at graduation about connecting the dots in life and how it's very hard to sometimes connect the dots looking forward, but when we stand at the end and we look back, we can connect the dots. And a lot of the dots we often try and connect is the adversity we faced and the things that came across our path that was super challenging at the time. And I've gone through a journey with my own daughter that was ill. Luckily, she's fully recovered, but that was super challenging. So I can only imagine what it must have been like for you and your wife when your son passed away. And now looking back on that and the impact it had on your life and connecting the dots for those events, what's the story that you tell yourself when you look back on everything?
Yeah, it was a very, very tough, challenging time. And you try to make sense of it. And many parents, have been in the same terrible situation. I call it the world's worst club. The club of parents that have lost children. And, people ask me, like, how do you get through it? How do you get through it? And, everyone's got their own path through grief. Everyone's got their own path to a new life, because that's what it is. You create a new life. Your life is irrevocably changed. In that moment you get that phone call, your that life is over. Your old life is done. And you try to make sense of it, but there is no sense to be made of that loss. So you just try to deal with it. So I'll tell you a few things that I've learned, because everyone has a different path, but this is what I've learned. Number one, you've got to be absolutely, unequivocally forgiving of yourself and your partner and your child. Whatever's happened, you've got to just forgive. And that's a very hard thing to do. Forgiving is very, very cathartic, but also it's hard to do it. But you've got to make, every fiber of your being has to be focused, just forgive. And then you've got to accept the finality of it. That's very difficult, that acceptance that, you're never going to be able to hug and kiss your boy again. It's very difficult, but you have to accept that, because otherwise you get down, you spin down into this downward spiral of what if, could have, would have, should have. So that acceptance is very hard. So those two things, forgiveness and acceptance, tough, and no one can really help you with that. I mean, you can see ministers or rabbis or priests or psychologists or psychiatrists, but it's self. That is self. And then the things that you can do that can help you is connect with nature, whatever that might be. A walk on the beach, paddling out in the surf, just watching the sun rise or set. Just that connectivity to nature, super important for me. Then getting involved in a project or projects that are inspiring to you and can memorialize your son or daughter, or just inspiring projects. Like, I had a book at the publisher. I shut it down. I didn't want to release it. Then I thought, no, I've got to release it. I released my book, and I spoke about my book, and I made a film called Busting Down the Door that became very popular. And so I got involved in these projects, and then they gave me the inspiration to start telling my story. And I found that when you tell the stories, you can inspire people. You're not going to inspire them with data. You can inspire people with stories. And my stories, when they inspire people, they inspire me too. So talking about my loss and my journey helps me as much as it helps other people. And then get involved with a community group or a group or environmental group or a group that helps others. So helping others helps you. In fact, I believe that when I do my events for schools and universities and community groups and religious groups and prisons, I get maybe more out of it than the people who are listening to me. Those are some of the aspects of my journey that have been really helpful. But like I said, everyone handles and deals with that dark path on their own, on their own timetable and in their own way. And then understand that you can smile again. The sun will rise tomorrow. So you got to maintain the hope. I mean, always maintain the hope. Always maintain the hope. The lines from like my Surface Code, I wrote that 20 years ago. I will always paddle back out. For me, really important, resilience, perseverance, and then hope. And then also reconnect with your faith, whatever that might be, whatever religion you might be, whether you're Catholic, whether you Dutch Reform, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever you are, you reconnect with your faith. I remember when I had my loss, and I would go and sit in the synagogue, in the shul, where I had my bar mitzvah. And for Jews, every synagogue has an ark, and inside the ark is a scroll, a Torah. It's got the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books. And right above it is a lamp. It's called Ner Tamid in Hebrew. It means the everlasting light, the light that never goes out. And that represents, the light of hope. And I'd sit there and I'd look at it, and 2 hours before I lost my boy, and my wife and I lost our son, he read me an essay. He was at my old school in South Africa, at Clifton. And he read me this essay, and it was about tube riding, which is what I was really known for in surfing. And he had this line in there, the light shines ahead. The light shines ahead. I mean, how about those for beautiful words? And I said, hey, Matthew, where'd you find that? And he said, Dad, I wrote it today for my essay at school. Just beautiful words. So, that concept of light, super important. Light, what does it represent? It represents faith. It represents hope. And it cuts across all religions. This is the foundational basis for all religions: hope, faith, light. And then how about this? You mentioned, Justinus, about that Steve Jobs quote. And yes, I have thought about that quote, about how you can only make sense of things by looking backwards. And those connections, like, why do they happen? So a friend kept phoning me, hey, Shaun, I want to take you surfing. No, there's no way. Surfers call it being stoked. Stoked, it's like a fire that burns in surfers. You can see when Rob speaks, he's stoked about surfing. Once you've caught a wave, there is a sort of fire that burns in you. I don't know what it is about you. You stand up on that board for the first time, and you get that fire. But you don't have to be a surfer. But everyone at some point in their lives experience that feeling of being stoked. And maybe it's on a rugby field, cricket, tennis, or whatever sport you play, or whatever achievement you've created. You get that stoked feeling. My stoke had gone out. My fire was extinguished. So my mate kept phoning me. I sat next to him in class in my school, Carmel College. Hey, Shaun, take you surfing. No. And I don't know how long it was afterwards. I went, okay. He said, Shaun, I'm going to take you to a break you've never surfed before. So we drive up the coast of Durban on the way towards Belido Bay, and he takes me to the spot, and we walk down these steps, and it's a perfect day. The surf is like 4 to 5 feet, perfect. Just 2 of us, and the sun is boiling up through the ocean. It's rising. That African sun, when it rises up out the Indian Ocean, there's like no sight like that on earth. And I paddle out, and I'm crying. And the first wave washes over me, and it washes my tears away. How about that? And I paddle out again, And the next wave does the same thing. And I can feel my son's right there with me. I paddle out. And the next wave washes my tears away. And then I catch a wave and I ride it. And I can feel that my boy's with me. And, these feelings, these are real. I tell people, when you feel this is real. This is real. This is real. And catch another wave. And now my whole universe seems to be getting back on its axis. And it's okay for me to surf again. It's okay for me to smile again. And then I paddle up to my mate. And every single surf spot in the world has got a name. It's got a unique name, one name. And I paddle out to my mate and I go, "Hey, Graham, what's the name of the spot?" He says it's Sunrise. How about that? Yeah, so that was I think a start of a new path for me, and a kind of a rebuilding process. And I just found that writing books and sharing my message helped people and helped me. And I've been on that path now for 20 years, and I love to do it. And one of the things that I love the most is I wrote the Surface Code card 20 years ago. I wrote it in 15 minutes, 12 lines. Every line begins with "I will." It's 12 commitments. I'll always paddle back out. I'll never turn my back on the ocean. I'll realize that all surfers are joined by one ocean. Really, really simple. And now I get people all over the world. They write their own code. 12 lines. Every line begins with "I will." People can go to my website, shauntomson.com. It's free. And people downloading their codes from my website every single day. You get people downloading these codes. And I get people to write the code, 12 lines. Every line begins with "I will." 15 minutes. That's all it takes. And it's just an exercise in visualization, introspection, focus, commitment. It's an exercise in power. I will, power. And when I speak to kids, I go, "I will" equals power. And they all chant it, power, 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 power. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, power, power. So that's what I do. And I love it. And okay, what does this do? Yes, it's good for you. You write your code. But when families write it together, or schools write it together, or business groups write it together, it creates engagement and connectivity in this broken down world. The world is broken. In America, you've got Republicans on one side of the valley, you've got Democrats on the other, you've got all this religious, this anti-Semitism, you've got Ukraine, Russia. You want to bring people together. That's why sport is so unbelievable, because sport, yes, my code brings people together, but sport brings people together in such an incredible way. And sportsmen have got so much power for positivity, but also the reverse as well. So sportsmen have got big responsibility.
Thanks for sharing, man. That's so powerful. It's such a moving experience. Thank you. What you've done and the impact you've had and how that's pivoted your life is such an inspiration. I think I can't imagine going through that, but your ability to take that and turn it around into impact is so inspirational. So what's next? Where will you watch the next World Cup when the boys go for the three-peat? And what are you going to be doing between now and then?
So I got an invite. It was one of the New Zealand games. And so a group of Kiwis invited me here in Montecito, where I live. We have about 10 South African families, but I don't know, for some reason they were doing other stuff. But a group of Kiwis invited me over to their house. There's about 6 of them. And so I go and I find my Springbok tracksuit that I wore when I was in the army I was in the army in 1973. So my dad said, to my father, the greatest honor that any sportsman could have in South Africa was to wear the green and gold, was to be a Springbok. That was it. Springbok, that's it. So I'm going, my dad said, I want you to take along your Springbok tracksuit. And at the end of the day, when you finish there, and you guys can put on your Springbok tracksuit. So I go there. First day, they're 17 years old, and we are getting hammered there, by the corporalkies. And I put on the tracksuit. That was it. I was now the Bokkie. So now I still got the tracksuit. I kept it as a memento. So I go to watch the game with the Kiwis, and I got my tracksuit on. It's a little bit tight, but it was so fun. And I'll go somewhere here in Santa Barbara. My mate, he was an ex-Marty, played for the Marties, Tian Bezuidenhout. And he always has the games up, and we get a South African crew together. Sometimes you throw a lamb on the spit there, and we have a good throw some burri there. There's some people that make burri in the States now. So we keep up the vibe. Keep up the support for the boys.
That's great. It's such good stories, and you're such an inspiration for young and fellows like myself and Justinus, and looking up to you and learning lessons from you. And it's just so awesome. You're an absolute legend.
Thank you, Flip. Thank you, and Justinus. Thanks for having me on. Rob Louw was he was like in our house. Rob Louw was like a god there. People loved him. They loved him for who he was, his personality, and just his style of play. It was so progressive. You know what I mean? It was so open. It was so creative. It was sort of the essence of, I think, of great sport. And the day that I walked into Newlands with him that I talk about earlier, I mean, it was so amazing to see how people love that dude. To hear that he has never been unbanned. I mean, that is a bloody travesty. That needs to be corrected. I mean, you know what I mean? He did what he had to do in order to survive and continue playing in those days. The whole amateurism, shamateurism thing. I mean, we need to somehow correct that issue, man. There needs to be like let me tell you, an unbanning Rob Louw ceremony at Newlands that would pack the stands before one of the big games and before a big test there. How cool would that be?
Well, there's a big All Black test there next year, and maybe if you commit to come, we can try and organize that.
Wouldn't that be amazing? How cool would that be, unbanning? It would be, you know what I mean? You could, the people around Cape Town, unban Rob Louw. It would be just so fun.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Shaun and Rob. That was absolutely amazing to spend time with you and learn from you. I really, really appreciate it. It's the first time we've had one of these podcasts with people that sort of a generation or two before me and Flip, and it has been an unbelievable experience. I loved every minute of it, and thanks for being vulnerable and thanks for sharing.
No, appreciate that. So this is in Hawaii, they call this a shaka. It's like a greeting. It's also a how's it. It's also an expression of aloha. It's an expression of friendship. So my program is double shaka, and it's spelled with 2 Ks, not 1 K, extra K for kindness. Every time I do an event for a corporate, I do a free one for a school group, university, whatever. So double shaka, lads.
Thank you very much. Flip?
Yeah, thank you, Shaun. This was great sharing with you and sharing with Rob. And we hope to catch up soon with the next Bok game.
So thanks for listening to Winning the Away Game, where we pair Springbok legends with South African expats trading trails abroad. Let us know who else you would like us to get on, and make sure to subscribe to help us build the audience and get some great guests. And we're doing it in partnership with the Lekker Network that's connecting South Africans all over the world. So thanks for the support, and we'll catch you next time.